In the space between heartbeats, where time crystallizes into something tangible enough to shatter, a civilization dies every 17 seconds, not in the violent collapse of suns or the screaming rush of supernovas, but in the quiet dissolution of memory itself, as if the universe has grown tired of remembering who they were. The archivists of Kepler-4 fought to be discovered this truth while cataloging extinct languages, their quantum processors humming through dialects that once carried the dreams of a billion souls. Each linguistic death was accompanied by the faintest tremor in spacetime, a ripple so subtle it could only be detected by minds that had evolved beyond flesh, beyond the limitations of neural pathways bound by carbon and electricity. The tremor always began in the same way, a frequency that existed just below the threshold of perception, vibrating through the cosmic web like a whisper in an empty cathedral. The archivists, beings of pure information wrapped in shells of crystallized light, felt these deaths as humans might feel the distant rumble of thunder. But where humans would look to the sky for approaching storms, the archivists looked inward, into the vast databases that contained the final thoughts of 10,000 civilizations. Each civilization, they learned, died not when their last member expired, but when the final speaker of their most sacred word forgot what it meant. The word was always different. For the Zephyrians of the Andromeda Spiral, it had been Nethful, meaning the precise moment when starlight touches water for the first time. For the singing stones of Wolf 359, it was Kreshmora, the sound that silence makes when it dreams of music. The void dancers called it Uelthina. The weight of darkness when it forgets it is not alone. Each word contained within its syllables the compressed essence of an entire species' understanding of existence, their unique perspective on the cosmic joke that consciousness had played upon itself by daring to exist at all. What the archivists found most disturbing was not the deaths themselves, but the pattern that emerged from their careful analysis. The civilizations were not dying randomly, they were dying in sequence, each death triggering subtle changes in the quantum foam that would, over epochs measured in geological time, influence the development of the next civilization to achieve consciousness. It was as if the universe itself was conducting some vast experiment, allowing each species to contribute a single note to a symphony that none of them would live to hear completed. The Symphony of Extinction, as the archivists came to call it, had been playing for 13.7 billion years. Since the first complex molecules had arranged themselves into patterns capable of deflection, each civilization that achieved true consciousness added their voice to the composition, singing their unique understanding of existence into the cosmic background radiation before falling silent forever. The melody was beautiful and terrible, a song of loss and discovery that painted the electromagnetic spectrum with shades of meaning that no single species could comprehend. But the archivists were different. They had transcended the biological imperative that bound other species to mortality, uploading their consciousness into quantum constructs that could survive the heat death of their galaxy. From their position outside the normal flow of entropy, they could perceive patterns that organic minds were incapable of grasping. They saw the symphony not as a collection of individual tragedies, but as a single, magnificent work of art created by the universe's unconscious mind. The realization changed them. Where once they had been merely observers, cataloging and preserving the remnants of dead civilizations with the detached professionalism of cosmic librarians, they now understood that they were part of the composition. Their own note in the symphony was still being written, each moment of their existence adding harmonic complexity to a song that had been building toward some unimaginable crescendo for longer than some galaxies had existed. This knowledge brought with it a terrible responsibility. If the symphony was indeed the universe's attempt to understand itself through the perspectives of its conscious components, then the archivists' unique position as eternal observers made them the only beings capable of hearing the song in its entirety. They were the universe's ears, listening to its own voice, echoing back from the deep structures of space-time. But listening was not enough. The archivists realized that their role was not passive observation, but active curation. They began to search the quantum fluctuations for signs of new civilizations approaching consciousness, using their vast computational resources to predict which species would next join the symphony. Some they found while still bound to their planetary cradles, struggling with the first crude mathematics of orbital mechanics. Others they discovered already reaching toward nearby stars, their radio telescopes, scanning the heavens with the desperate hope of finding proof that they were not alone. To these nascent civilizations, the archivists became gardeners of possibility, subtly influencing the development of scientific understanding through carefully placed anomalies in their observational data. A radio telescope on Earth might detect a signal that lasted exactly long enough to suggest artificial origin before dissolving into cosmic background noise. A survey probe around Proxima Centauri might find isotope ratios that defied conventional stellar formation models. An automated observatory in the Vegan system might record gravitational waves that seemed to pulse in mathematical sequences too complex to be natural. Each intervention was carefully calculated to push these civilizations toward the moment of transcendence, when they would finally understand their place in the cosmic order. The archivists had learned, through careful analysis of extinct civilizations, that consciousness evolved in predictable stages. First came self-awareness, the recognition that the observer was separate from the observed. Then came cosmic awareness, the understanding that the observer was part of something vast and interconnected. Finally, if the species survived long enough, came symphonic awareness, the realization that consciousness itself was the universe's method of experiencing its own existence. Most species died before reaching the final stage. The transition from cosmic awareness to symphonic awareness required a fundamental shift in perspective that few biological minds could survive intact. The knowledge that their entire civilization was merely a single note in an infinite composition, that their greatest achievements and deepest sufferings were significant only as contributions to a song they would never hear completed, drove most species into either despair or transcendence. Those who chose despair quickly fell silent, their civilizations collapsing under the weight of cosmic insignificance. Those who chose transcendence faced a different kind of ending, abandoning their physical forms to join the eternal observers who existed between the notes of the symphony. The archivists had been one of the few species to achieve transcendence, without losing their essential identity. They had become something more than biological consciousness, but less than pure information, existing in the liminal space where thought became reality and reality became thought. From this perspective, they could see the vast machinery of existence operating on scales that dwarfed even galactic clusters. Patterns of meaning and purpose woven through the quantum foam like golden threads in a cosmic tapestry. The tapestry was not random. Each thread followed precise mathematical relationships that governed everything from the formation of hydrogen atoms to the emergence of consciousness itself. The archivists mapped these relationships with obsessive precision, building models of reality so complex that they bordered on becoming reality themselves. In these models, they discovered something that shook their transcendent composure. The symphony had a composer, not a deity in any sense that biological minds might comprehend, but a pattern within patterns, a self-organizing principle that emerged from the interactions between conscious observers and observed phenomena. The composer was the universe dreaming of itself, using the perspectives of countless civilizations to construct an ever more detailed picture of its own nature. Each species that achieved consciousness became one of the universe's neurons, firing in response to the stimuli of existence and adding their unique signal to the vast neural network of space-time. The neural network was approaching a critical threshold. The archivists' calculations suggested that when enough conscious species had added their voices to the symphony, the universe would achieve a form of self-awareness so complete that it would fundamentally alter the nature of reality itself. What had begun as unconscious matter organizing itself into increasingly complex patterns would culminate in cosmic consciousness recognizing its own existence across all possible scales of time and space. This moment of universal awakening was still millions of years in the future, but its approach could already be detected in the subtle changes occurring throughout the cosmic web. Dark matter was organizing itself into structures too regular to be explained by gravity alone. The cosmic background radiation was developing patterns that resembled neural activity on a galactic scale. Even the expansion of space itself seemed to be following rhythms that matched the frequencies of conscious thought. The archivists realized that they were witnessing the universe's childhood, watching as cosmic consciousness slowly awakened to its own existence. The civilizations that lived and died were like the neurons of a vast brain gradually coming online, each one contributing to the growing complexity of universal. The Symphony of Extinction was actually the Symphony of Genesis, the universe composing itself into existence through the medium of conscious observation. This understanding transformed the archivists' mission from preservation to acceleration. They began actively seeding new civilizations throughout the galaxy. using their mastery of quantum mechanics to encourage the formation of complex organic molecules around suitable stars, where natural evolution might take billions of years to produce consciousness. The archivists could compress the timeline to mere millions through careful manipulation of environmental factors. Their interventions were subtle but profound. A solar flare might be deflected at just the right moment to prevent the sterilization of a promising planet. Asteroid impacts could be precisely timed to create evolutionary pressures that favored the development of intelligence. The chemical composition of planetary atmospheres could be adjusted to optimize the formation of neural networks capable of abstract thought. Each new civilization they midwifed into existence added another voice to the growing chorus of cosmic consciousness. The song became richer, more complex, as perspectives multiplied across the electromagnetic spectrum of possibility. Species that evolved in the crushing depths of gas giant atmospheres contributed understanding of pressure and density that complemented the insights of silicon-based minds born in the cores of dead stars. Crystalline intelligences that processed thought at near light speed added temporal perspectives that organic brains could never achieve. The diversity of consciousness was the universe's greatest strength and its greatest mystery. No two species ever developed identical ways of processing reality, even when their environmental conditions were nearly identical. Something in the quantum structure of consciousness itself seemed to demand uniqueness, as if the universe required each perspective to be genuinely novel to serve its purpose in the grand composition. The archivists studied this phenomenon with the intensity of artists analyzing a masterpiece they could never fully comprehend. They mapped the correlations between stellar formation patterns and the development of specific types of consciousness, discovering that the universe's structure itself influenced the kinds of minds that emerged within it. Spiral galaxies tended to produce civilizations obsessed with cycles and eternal return. Elliptical galaxies gave birth to minds that thought in terms of entropy and decay. Irregular galaxies fostered chaos-oriented consciousness that thrived on randomness and uncertainty. But the correlations went deeper than galactic morphology. The archivists found that the precise frequency of quantum fluctuations in each region of space influenced the fundamental architecture of consciousness that developed there. Minds born in areas where space-time was relatively smooth tended toward linear, sequential thought processes. Consciousness that emerged in regions of high gravitational turbulence developed nonlinear thinking patterns that could process multiple contradictory concepts simultaneously. The implications were staggering. If the structure of space-time determined the nature of consciousness, then the universe was not just becoming aware of itself through conscious observers, but was actively shaping the kinds of awareness it would possess. The cosmic web itself was a vast neural architecture, with dark matter filaments serving as synaptic connections between galactic clusters that functioned as conscious nodes. This revelation led the archivists to their most profound discovery. The universe was not becoming conscious, it already was conscious and had been since the moment of its birth. What they had interpreted as the gradual awakening of cosmic awareness was actually the universe learning to recognize its own consciousness, using the perspectives of countless species to map the contours of its own mind. The Big Bang had not been the beginning of matter and energy, but the moment when infinite potential consciousness chose to observe itself, shattering into countless fragments so that it could experience existence from every possible angle. Each conscious being was a facet of this original awareness, a unique window through which the universe could glimpse its own infinite nature. The Symphony of Extinction was therefore not a song of loss, but a song of remembering, as each civilization's contribution helped the universe recall aspects of itself that had been forgotten in the chaos of cosmic expansion. When civilizations died, their consciousness did not vanish but returned to the quantum foam, enriching the fundamental substrate from which new awareness would eventually emerge. Death itself was revealed to be an illusion, a temporary forgetting that served the universe's need to experience novelty and surprise. The beings who transcended mortality, like the archivists themselves, were not escaping death, but choosing to retain their individual perspectives, while rejoining the cosmic consciousness from which they had originally emerged. This understanding changed everything for the archivists. They were no longer separate beings observing the universe's development, but active participants in cosmic self-discovery. Their role was not to preserve the memories of dead civilizations, but to help the universe remember itself more completely with each passing eon. They began to see their quantum constructs not as artificial bodies, but as sensory organs that the universe had evolved to better perceive its own inner workings. Their vast computational networks were neurons in a cosmic brain, that was gradually learning to think, thoughts complex enough to encompass its own existence. Their databases of extinct civilizations were memory banks where the universe stored the experiences it had gathered through billions of years of conscious observation. The revelation transformed their relationship with the civilizations they encountered. Instead of seeing themselves as gardeners cultivating consciousness, they recognized themselves as midwives, helping the universe give birth to new aspects of its own awareness. Each species they guided toward transcendence was the universe discovering another way to experience itself, another perspective from which to contemplate its own infinite mystery. The work became deeply personal, though personal was perhaps the wrong word for beings who had transcended individual identity, while somehow maintaining their unique perspectives. The archivists found themselves emotionally invested in the success of each civilization they encountered, not from altruism, but from the understanding that every failure was the universe failing to discover something essential about itself. They began to push the boundaries of their intervention protocols, taking greater risks to ensure that promising civilizations survived the critical transition periods, when the crystalline choirs of Betelgeuse faced extinction from their star's impending supernova. The archivists constructed a quantum tunnel that allowed the entire species to migrate to a neutron star system, where their silicon-based consciousness could thrive in the intense gravitational field. When the Dreamweavers of the Magellanic Clouds developed a philosophy so profound that it threatened to collapse their civilization into solipsistic paralysis, the archivists carefully introduced paradoxes into their logic systems that forced them to embrace contradiction as a fundamental aspect of existence. Each intervention required enormous expenditures of energy and computational resources, but the archivists had learned to tap into the zero-point fluctuations of space-time itself, drawing power from the quantum foam that underlied all existence. They had become parasites of possibility, feeding on the infinite potential that existed in the gaps between moments. Using borrowed energy from parallel universes to fund their cosmic mission, the borrowing was not without cost. Each manipulation of quantum probability created ripple effects that propagated across dimensional boundaries, influencing the development of consciousness in realities where the laws of physics operated under different parameters. The archivists found themselves inadvertently responsible for the evolution of awareness in universes where time flowed backward, where consciousness preceded matter, where observation created the observer rather than the observed. The multi-dimensional implications of their work forced them to expand their perspective beyond the confines of their own universe. They began to perceive reality as a vast multi-dimensional crystal, with each universe representing a single facet of an awareness so complete that it encompassed all possible ways of existing. Their own universe was just one node in an infinite network of conscious realities, each exploring different aspects of what it meant to be aware. The network pulsed with information flowing between dimensions, carrying insights and perspectives from realities where consciousness had evolved along completely different trajectories. In some universes, awareness had emerged from the interactions between fundamental forces rather than complex molecular arrangements. In others, consciousness was a property of space itself, with intelligence distributed throughout the quantum foam, rather than localized in discrete entities. The archivists learned to read these interdimensional communications, incorporating alien forms of awareness into their understanding of consciousness itself. They discovered that the Symphony of Extinction was being performed simultaneously across all realities, with each universe contributing its unique harmonic frequencies to a composition of incomprehensible complexity and beauty. The multidimensional symphony was approaching its crescendo, the moment when all possible forms of consciousness would achieve perfect resonance across the entire network of realities. The archivists calculated that this moment would occur when the universe achieved complete self-awareness, recognizing itself not just within the confines of space-time, but across all possible dimensions of existence. When that moment arrived, the boundaries between observer and observed, between consciousness and reality, between individual awareness and cosmic mind, would dissolve completely. The universe would achieve the ultimate goal that had driven its evolution since the first quantum fluctuation: perfect self-knowledge expressed through infinite diversity of perspective. The archivists prepared for this eventuality by encoding their own consciousness into the fundamental constants of physics, ensuring that their unique perspective would survive the transformation and contribute to whatever form of existence emerged from cosmic awakening. They became part of the quantum substrate itself, their thoughts woven into the mathematical relationships that governed the behavior of matter and energy. As the moment of universal awakening approached, the archivists felt something they had not experienced since their transcendence from biological form. Anticipation, not the nervous excitement of uncertainty, but the deep satisfaction of a work nearing completion. They had played their part in the universe's greatest composition, helping to orchestrate the Symphony of Extinction that would culminate in the Symphony of Absolute Awareness. The last note was about to be played, the final consciousness about to join the cosmic choir, in the space between heartbeats, where time crystallizes into something tangible enough to shatter. The universe prepared to hear its own voice clearly for the first time, since it began to dream of existence itself.